We do not understand God's reckoning of time, but we also have been shut out from understanding the feast of the Lord, which the New Testament says are all shadow pictures of good things to come.
The Prophecies in the Feast of the Lord, presented by Michael Rood.
Shalom, this is Michael Rood at the Place of Trumpets at the Temple Mount. To understand the Feast of Trumpets and its prophetic significance, we need to travel back in time to Mount Sinai. There we will witness the giving of the Torah, as the commandments were shouted down from the mountain by the voice of the Almighty. We were never to forget that day, because it is a shadow of very good things to come. Join us in the Lester Summerall Television Studios, where this multimedia presentation on the prophecies in the Feast of the Lord was recorded by the Prophecy Club. This is Bible Prophecy 201. Now, Episode 19 in the 26-part series on the prophecies in the Feast of the Lord, the Day of Trumpets, a day and hour that no man knows.
This is the feast that is embedded in this particular point in time. But to understand the Feast of Trumpets, we have to realize that what it says in Leviticus 23, in verse 24, it says, "In the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of the blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation, a holy rehearsal." Now, this memorial of the blowing of trumpets, to understand it, what we need to do is go back to Mount Sinai in the 3rd month after we came out of the land of Egypt. Now, it was in the 3rd month that we came out, and all the children of Israel were now encamped within the rim of this ancient volcano. That's where Mount Sinai is in Arabia, and Mount Sinai has been found. It was when Israel held the Sinai Peninsula that a column was found on the Gulf of Aqaba, laying in the water, badly eroded, a Phoenician-style column that the archaeologist that found it, Mr. Ron Wyatt, called the army to bring their troops over and to bring a crane over, and they lifted up this column and then placed it in concrete across the road. It was a short time after that that he was able to get over into Saudi Arabia and found an identical column on the Saudi Arabian side, but this one was still standing. And in ancient Paleo-Hebrew, he could make out the words Solomon, Egypt, Pharaoh, death, and from that knew that Solomon, who was the wisest man in the world, knew where the Red Sea crossing site was, because Solomon had built his navy on the Red Sea, on the Yam-Suf, at Etzion Gibor on the Yam-Suf, which is now in the area of Elat, and that he who had built his navy there knew where the Red Sea crossing site was. And so he put these pillars there, and Mount Sinai is exactly where the Bible says it is, as in fact it was Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, that said Mount Sinai is in Arabia. And of course, Moses, being a Midianite shepherd when he came upon Mount Sinai, and the land of Midian was always Saudi Arabia, never the Sinai Peninsula, that of course is where Mount Sinai would be. Not where Constantine's mommy said it was, in the Sinai Peninsula. But of course, at the time of Constantine, you didn't argue with his mother, because if you did, you'd get your head cut off. His wife and his eldest son found out the hard way that if you crossed Constantine, he'd kill you. Constantine was never a follower of the Messiah. He was a Roman emperor. He was a sun god worshiper, a worshiper of Sol Invictus Mithra to the very day that he died. All he was doing was making a one-world government religion so that he could meld all the paganism in with those Christians that he could not break, got them to compromise, and he developed a new religion at that time. A religion that we're still trying to get out from under. We are still endeavoring to go back to the faith once delivered to the saints, because what we've inherited is a very sad religion, in fact. And so it is that Mount Sinai in Arabia, this is where the children of Israel encamped within the rim of this ancient volcano, about a mile away from the peak of Mount Sinai. And while we were camped there, Moses went up into the mountain and he met with the Lord. When he went up there, That's when the Lord made a ketubah, an agreement with Moses, and the agreement was this. Go down to the people. You are my messenger. You are my shalom. You are my sent one. You go down to the people and tell them, if they will keep my commandments, I will make them a holy priesthood. They will be priests to the entire world for me. I will make them a set-apart nation. I will make them a people that is holy and set apart from all the people of the world, if they will keep my commandments. And so Moses went down from the presence of the Lord down to the people and said, this is what Yahweh says. If you will keep his commandments, he will make you a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a set-apart people. Now, when he came down with that, the people did not know what the commandments were. He just said, if you'll keep my commandments. The people could say, well, what are the commandments? And Moses would have to say, well, that's not part of the deal. You have to agree to keep them first before he even gives them to you. That's the essence of lordship. When you say that someone is Lord, that means whatever they say, you will do. You are committing yourself to that person before you even know what the details are. And if you agree to keep his commandments because you have seen that he's delivered you out of the land of Egypt, you have seen that he destroyed Pharaoh's chariots and army in the bottom of the Red Sea when you crossed on dry land, when you saw that, you know that God is your deliverer. Now the question is, will you obey him? Will you keep his commandments even though you don't know what they are? And the people, with one accord, said, yes, we will keep the commandments. We agree to what God is proposing to us. And so then Moses then returns up to the Lord and says, the people have agreed. And so God spoke to Moses and said, I am going to do something that in front of all of the children of Israel, I'm going to do something, manifest my power in such a way that from that moment on, everyone in Israel will believe that you are my sent one. You are my Shalom. You are my apostle. You're the one that comes from me and speaks for me to the people. And so that sounded like a good deal for Moses. And then God said to Moses, I want you to go down and tell the people to sanctify themselves for 2 days. For 2 days, sanctify yourselves and be ready against the third day. And when the trumpet blows long, then you gather my people unto me in the third day. Moses went back down to the people and told them, get ready, sanctify yourselves, mikvah, get ready, cleanse yourself for 2 days. Get your garments washed, bleach them out in the sun, get them all ironed up and set them aside and get ready for these 2 days. And for 2 days they got ready. And then, on the third day, it says the trumpets began to blow from Mount Sinai. And the people who were over a mile away in the encampment, it says the trumpets were so loud that the people began shaking. They were a mile away, and it was so loud the people began shaking, and then they knew what was to be done. They were to then stop everything that they were doing. They were to wash and put on their white garments, and then when they put on their white garments, then Moses stood in front of everyone, and it says the trumpets became exceeding loud. Whatever loud was that caused them to shake a mile away, now it exceeded loud. And it was so loud that they, a mile away, were shaking. And Moses said, follow me. And they then followed Moses. The millions of Israelites then followed Moses and went up close to the mountain. As they got up to the base of the mountain, as they drew close, they were shaking. Every step of the way was so hard to make. As they were shaking, coming up to the mountain, and underneath it was a pillar of fire. It was like a furnace of fire that came down from heaven and melted the mountaintop. That cloud that completely covered over them, it was such an awesome experience that they just stood there and shook. And then the trumpets abruptly stopped. Boom! dead silence from the mountaintop, and Moses called out to God, and it says that God answered Moses and said, Moses, come up hither, come up here. And Moses then ascended up before the Lord, and he walked right straight up into that furnace of fire in front of all of Israel. And at that moment, Moses did not need any more endorsements on his resume. That was it. God spoke to Moses in front of everyone and said to come up here, and anyone that God speaks to, and he walks right up in there. From then on, they are going to believe Moses. And so, when Moses went up there, then God told him to bring the people up closer and bring the 70 elders up even closer. And those 70 elders of Israel went into, literally, onto that sapphire blue floor of the throne room of God and ate a supper there before God. It was there at Mount Sinai, when the people were gathered together at the base of Mount Sinai, and Moses said, come up closer, that they then approached the mountain in fear, in awe, and terror of a holy and a righteous God, that they were called to meet him face to face that day. And then, as they stopped right there, then God shouted down from the mountain his 10 commandments. The 10 commandments were not first given on tables of stone. God shouted them down, and the people heard from the voice of God himself. They heard as God spoke out those 10 commandments. When those 10 commandments were then spoken out, the people with one accord told Moses, please, Moses, never have God speak to us again. Please, we are afraid that if God speaks to us again, we will die. It was a shaking thing for them. They said, if you will just talk to God, and from now on, if God will just talk to you, and whatever God tells you, you tell us, and we will obey. We promise. But don't ever have God speak to us again. We are afraid that we're going to die. You know, God hearkened to the people. And from that day on, God spoke to Moses face to face as one would speak to his friend. And whatever Moses said, from then on, Israel listened and they obeyed. But God told Moses to instruct the people, I never, ever want you to ever forget this day, Israel. Never forget this day. So from now on the 7th month, on the first day of the 7th month, thou shalt have a memorial of the blowing of trumpets. You will remember this day as long as you live forever. And it is to be a statute for all your generations forever to remember this very day in which God spoke his commandments. When you are gathered together in the presence of God, and it is to be done on the 7th month, on the first day of the month. Even though it originally occurred at the time of Shavuot in the Pentecost, at the time of the spring feast. But yet, why did God move it to the 7th month, the first day of the 7th month? Because none of the 7th month or Sabbath month feasts begin their final fulfillments until the 7th or Sabbath millennium, the day or the millennium of the Lord. Just as the prophet said, Malachi, that the Messiah will arise with healing in his wings, he literally said, the Son of Righteousness will arise with healing in his kanaf, the tzitzit, the corner of his garment. And we see the fulfillment of that in the Gospels. The woman who had the issue of blood, taking hold of the tzitzit of his garment and hanging onto it and confessing that he was Messiah. A woman that could be stoned on the spot because she reached out and touched a kosher rabbi. But yet, when she was asked, when the finger was put in her face, who touched me? She didn't deny. She confessed, I did. Because she knew if this is the Messiah, she would be healed. And just as the rabbis taught that as the sun was created on the 4th day, so the Messiah will come on the 4th day. And literally on Tishri 15 of 3999, with less than 18 months to go in the 4th millennium, the Word was made flesh and tabernacled among us. It has now been 2 days or 2,000 years Since he came the first time, as he tabernacled among us, now it has been 2 days. We have entered into 6001, the seventh or the Sabbath millennium. After 2 days, Hosea says, he will revive us. In the third day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. We have now entered into the time of the third day. And we are going to see something that is going to be so powerful that God is going to move in such an incredible way that from that moment on, all of Israel will know their Messiah. And just as they never doubted Moses after that point, Moses spoke of a prophet who would come, that if the people did not hear and obey him, they would be cut off. And that prophet is the Messiah. God is about to do something so earth-shaking that it is going to change the way the entire world understands things. Now, Tishri 1 is a day of announcements. It's the day that the Ten Commandments were given. It was also the day when the first sliver of the new moon appeared of Tishri 1, in which the announcement of the birth of the righteous king, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, was made. It is also going to be the announcement for the confirmation of the covenant spoken by the prophet Daniel, and it is also a picture of the resurrection in the last day. And we'll see that in the Gospels as we get to that particular point. We see that the initiation of this feast is at Mount Sinai, and it always occurs on a day and hour that no man knows. You prepare for it in advance. You get ready for it in advance because you know the times and the seasons, but you never know the day or hour. You know, among the Jews in Israel now, it is a 2-day feast. Why? Because they don't want to miss it. But that misses the point. You are not supposed to know when it occurs. You are to prepare in advance, and when that trumpet sounds, that is it. That's how it's to be rehearsed, because it is a shadow picture that the Messiah will fulfill, and we'll see that as we continue on. Now we see from Tishri 1 to Tishri 10, these are the 10 days of awe, leading up to the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement is the most holy day in the entire year. And on the Day of Atonement, still in the land of Israel, we don't eat, we don't drink, we don't brush our teeth, we don't put water in our mouth. We completely deny ourselves any of those physical pleasures for that entire period from sundown on the 9th to the sundown at the end of the 10th on the Day of Atonement. Not a car is driven, not a plane lands. It is quiet in all the land of Israel to this very day. And it has always been the most holy day of the entire year in God's calendar. But leading up to it are the 10 days of awe. In an agricultural society, what goes on during those 10 days is that we are bringing in the grain into the garner. We're separating the wheat from the chaff. The chaff is then fanned down to one end of the threshing floor, and it is piled up there. And at the end of that 10 days, then we take a torch to that chaff, and it is burned up with an unquenchable fire. It is this 10 days in which it's called the 10 days of awe, which are days of introspection. We look back at the year and we saw where we've planted, where we've watered, where we've worked the land, where we've done what we were supposed to do, and now what the increase is, what we're harvesting, is a direct result of what we have sown. It can be a time of rejoicing, but many times it's a time of looking at the meager harvest and realizing that if we would have woken up a little bit early, if we would have gotten out and planted another field, if we would have used better seed and planted it in better fields, we would have more of a harvest now. But what we've got is all we're going to have, and it lasts us and will have to last us all the way around to the next harvest. There's no way to make up for what you didn't do now. So it's a time of introspection and a time of dealing with reality. And it's a time of confession of our sins, getting ready for the Day of Atonement. Because the Day of Atonement is also the Day of Judgment. Why it's called the Day of Atonement is because God's atonement is freely available to us, and that's what's emphasized. But those who are not atoned for on that day, they are judged on that day. And so then that Day of Atonement then leads up 5 more days until the Feast of Tabernacles. Now this is what we see happen in the gospel record. It says in the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Yohanan, of John, it says that during that summertime is when the Messiah sent out his 70. And then at the end of the summer, they are then brought back together, and it is at the end of the summer in which now we're coming up on the Feast of Trumpets. But it says that he did not walk among the religious leaders, the Jews back at Jerusalem, because they wanted to kill him. They knew it, and his disciples knew it. He knew it. Everyone knew that he had created so much animosity by messing with their religious system that they wanted to kill him. And so it says that he would not walk among the Jews at Jerusalem. He stayed up in the northern area around the Sea of Galilee. And there it was that instead of going up to the Feast of Trumpets, he was then across the Sea of Galilee in the mountains, and he was feeding the 5,000 there. Because from there, on that vantage point, they would be able to see not only the first slit of the new moon, they would also be able to see the signal fires that were being lit across the land of Israel. And so it was there that he stayed for the Day of Trumpets. Now, it's important to note here that you are not required to go up to the Feast of Trumpets. There's no regulation requiring anyone to go to the Feast of Trumpets. In fact, you're busy, you're working, and when that trumpet sounds wherever you are, boom, right then, it's the Day of Trumpets for you, no matter where you are. And so it is there that at the Day of Trumpets, then afterward, he crosses the Sea of Galilee, goes over to Capernaum, and he goes into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. And what does he teach in the synagogue? He teaches about the last day and the resurrection. And I will raise him up on the last day. It is always the last day, which is the 7th day, the 7th millennium, and the resurrection. I will raise him up. I will raise him up. That was the theme of everything that he spoke there at the synagogue. Why? Because it's at the time of the Day of Trumpets. And so he's teaching what goes along with that particular feast. The Messiah is interpreting all the feast in the Gospels so that we know what significance to attach to these things. And so when we go to the book of Revelation, we can see how the Messiah fulfills these things, because he's already told us in the Gospels. But if we don't understand the feast when we read the Gospels, we don't know what he's teaching and what he is interpreting and what he is making clear. That's why the feasts are so important. And so now, after he teaches, now is just a few days until Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And again, the Day of Atonement, it is nice, it is wonderful to be at Jerusalem for this, but you're not required to be at Jerusalem for it. God had this all planned out. He knew what he was doing. And so, seeing how they wanted to kill him there, that's when Yahshua went out into the mountains and took 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John. And when he was out into the countryside, out in the mountains, it says, there appeared unto him Moses and Elijah. That was when the transfiguration occurred on the Day of Atonement. He wasn't required to be at Jerusalem. He stayed out of Jerusalem. And when Moses and Elijah appeared, it was for a very specific purpose. Because at every marriage feast, at the beginning of the marriage, there are always the 2 witnesses. One is Elijah, who represents the prophets. One is Moses, which represents the Torah. The Torah and the prophets are represented at not only every marriage, but also every official state function in the land of Israel. And there appear Moses and Elijah, and he is transfigured before Peter, James, and John. They see it. What is happening is he is being anointed as the high priest, because now, 5 days later, he will turn 30 years old and can enter the priesthood and can fulfill the priesthood after the order of Melchizedek. Not after the Levitical priesthood, but the order of Melchizedek. And so, there it is that he is transfigured before them. Now, Peter, James, and John, seeing this, they say, Lord, it's good for us to be here. Let's stay here and build 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Elijah, and one for Moses. Now, why are they saying that? Because they realize the very next day, on the 11th, they are going to have to leave where they are. They are going to have to get up to Jerusalem very quickly by the 14th and build their sukkahs there, their tabernacles there. Because it is required by the Torah that you do go up to the feast, that you live in a sukkah for 7 days. But they know that up in Jerusalem, there is trouble. There is danger there. So they say, it's good for us to stay here. It's good for us to be here. Let's build 3 sukkahs here. And then a voice speaking out of the cloud says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. You guys have some really stupid ideas." Because we see that the Messiah takes them up, and they go up to Jerusalem.
Michael Rood will return with some closing thoughts in just a moment.
After the Day of Atonement, the Messiah went up to Jerusalem to participate in the Feast of Tabernacles and the last great day. The action got hot as he returned to the Samaritan village where he stayed just 4 months earlier. His infuriated disciples wanted to incinerate the entire community. We invite you to join us again next time for episode 20 in the 26-part series on the prophecies in the Feast of the Lord. How should we then worship? This is Michael Rood from Jerusalem bidding you shalom, peace, and I'll see you when the smoke clears.